What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today, have we got a spicy reveal for you. The next hero pack has been announced for Marvel Champions, and it's gonna feature Star-Lord. Now, to be fair, this is weird, right? Because on the one hand, it is the first time in a long time we have had a hero reveal where we didn't know what the hero was before we got the article dropped and shown a bunch of cards. And on the other hand, we know that Galaxy's Most Wanted is going to be the next big box set, and that is going to start the Guardians of the Galaxy block, ending the Avengers block. And we know that that is going to bring us Rocket and Groot. So we kind of knew that Star-Lord, Drax, and Gamora were going to be the next three, and Star-Lord's the leader, so even though we didn't know it was Star-Lord, we kind of knew it was Star-Lord. For those of you wondering why there haven't been more Marvel Champions videos on this channel lately, there hasn't been a huge amount to talk about. But my Wasp review is coming in a day or two. I'm hearing that both Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch should be at my house in the next day or two. So there's 3 hero pack reviews coming in the next week, which is awesome. And hopefully there'll be more news and stuff to cover as well. And you know, whenever Marvel Champions news is being dropped, I will be here. It's kind of what I do. So Star-Lord then, starting off with Peter Quill, we've got a recovery of 3, which is fine, quite nice. Hand size of 6, which is absolutely standard. And hit points of 10, which is low. Like, really low. I've been mucking around with Wasp lately, because, you know, review coming. And Wasp is one of those heroes that has hit points of 11. And Wasp feels low. So when you're coming in and you're bringing me a 10 hit point hero, yowza. And don't get me wrong, Black Widow's got hit points of 9. It could be lower, but I always find that hit points lower than 12 feel low in a game, so this has me slightly nervous, but it's about the only thing. The entire thing looks awesome. And what we've got here is a setup skill, which happens as you're setting up the game, as the name might suggest, where you search your deck and discard pile for a copy of the Element Gun upgrade and add it to your hand, and then shuffle your deck. The Element Gun is Star-Lord's signature gun, and it will basically shoot elements for... It's a bad description, but it'll do for this video, gosh darn it. So, very much like we see with Thor and Mjolnir, which I cannot pronounce properly, and I'm not even really going to try very hard. It basically guarantees that you've got this at the beginning of the game, which you should, because in the same way that Thor has his hammer, we see that Star-Lord has his elemental guns. Hang on a second, that's the wrong way around. Captain America, Steve Rogers, searches for Captain America's shield at the beginning of the game and puts it in your hand. Odin's son, Thor's alter ego, has an action that searches your deck and discard pile for Mjolnir and adds it to your hand. Which, to be fair, you're going to start in alter ego mode, and then you just use the action to find it. So it's kind of the same, but it's not quite the same, and I do consider myself a pedant, so my apologies on that one. So you're going to have your elemental gun, and what's really sad is they haven't shown us Peter Quill's elemental gun or Star-Lord's elemental gun, so boo! Never mind. It's also got an action Smooth Talker. You choose a card in your hand and swap that card with the top card of your deck. It's not really draw power, but it allows you to cycle your deck a little bit faster. It allows you to see an extra card. So we've all had those turns where we've got a double resource but nothing worth spending it on. Or we have a literally unplayable hand. Or we just need to do a little more damage but we don't have a card that does any damage. Or we need an ally to defend but we don't have an ally, etc. What this essentially does is it lets you look at another card to see if you can find what you're looking for. Interesting to note, of course, that does guarantee the card you put down will be drawn at the end of your turn. But most of the time at the end of your turn, you're drawing 3 or 4 cards anyway, so it's really not the end of the world. Yeah, you'll draw that card back, but you'll draw a couple of others. You'll probably be fine. I like this. Start with your elemental gun, decent recovery, and you get to see extra cards. Count me in. Moving into Star-Lord, we got Thwart of 2, which is fine, Attack of 2, which is fine, Defense of 1, which is low. Nothing particularly high, and Defense is low, but it's got, 2 is kind of standard. so having a fort and attack of 2 is fine. Hit points of 10 remains low, and hand size of 5 is what we usually see in hero mode, though we have a way around that, we'll get there in a minute. But it gives each ally you control the Guardian trait, and clearly there are going to be cards that interact with cards that have the Guardian trait, so hopefully that's going to be worth it in the end. And then it's got what could go wrong. Interrupt, not a forced interrupt, important difference. When you play a card from your hand, you deal yourself one face down encounter card and reduce the resource cost to play that card by 3. I love this, but hoo boy, is it risky. It's extremely risky. It is hilariously risky. And I kind of like that. Obviously, if another encounter card is going to be coming around, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong here. More side schemes, more villains or minions, and just all kinds of things that could go hilariously wrong. But what about when it goes right, ladies and gentlemen? What about when it goes right? You see, essentially, I should have mentioned, this is being built off of Justice. So when you're playing Star-Lord, out of the box, you're playing Justice, although you don't have to. You can play any aspect when you get into deck building. And essentially what this means is you can take some of those Justice allies, which are generally way too expensive and not worth really having a play with, and all of a sudden you turn them into really cheap allies and they hit the field and life is good. So take Falcon from the Captain America pack. 4 cost, but it becomes a 1 cost. 2 fort with 1 damage, 2 attack with 1 damage, 3 health. And then when you play Falcon, you look at the top 3 cards of the encounter deck, and for each treachery looked at in this way, you remove 1 threat from a scheme. So yeah, sure, you take an extra encounter card, but you get a really good ally in play, and you take a bunch of threat off of the main scheme. That sounds kind of fun to me. Or you play Hawkeye from Captain America, which would end up being free, incidentally. And it's only got 1 fort, 1 attack. But Hawkeye enters play with 4 arrow counters on him. And after a minion enters play, you remove an arrow counter from Hawkeye to deal 2 damage to that minion. So the extra encounter card that you get could end up being a minion, for instance. But then Hawkeye's going to deal 2 damage before it's even got rolling, which might even take it out. And that's obviously the absolute dream, right? Because in that situation, you've actually lost nothing. You've just gained a pretty good ally on the field. So there are things to be pretty excited about with this. I could keep going. Leadership has a bunch of good allies. I'm just giving you a couple of examples now. And again, we could go away from leadership into all kinds of other aspects here. But my point is, sometimes reducing the cost by 3 is going to be worth an encounter card. I mean, one of my favorites, okay, I said I was done with examples, I'm going to give you one more example. I love Giant Man from the Ant-Man Hero Pack. But the fact of the matter is, it's a 5-cost ally. And most of the time, ladies and gentlemen, you ain't playing a 5-cost ally. It's not happening. It's too expensive. Well, now, ladies and gentlemen, now it's actually not too expensive anymore. Love it. Absolutely love it. But again, you got to take an encounter card, so, be a little bit careful. And this is a theme which goes through Star-Lord's cards here. Essentially, every hero seems to have its own little theme in the card game, and the theme here is take a bunch of encounter cards and cross your fingers. Also, shout out to the design team here, because every time a new hero pack is revealed, I go, wow, that really feels like a unique way to play that particular hero over any others. They've got to run out of ideas soon and stop doing this, but no, they just keep going. It's ridiculous. And obviously Peter Quill is very, very reckless, and that's what we're playing with here. So we could take a look at the 0-cost event Daring Escape. You deal yourself 1 face-down encounter card, that's a bad thing, but you ready your hero and you draw a card. And bearing in mind, if you combine that with Star-Lord's ability here, you could basically get yourself an extra 2 encounter cards. Remember, and this is sometimes confusing for newer players, you only ever reveal encounter cards during that part of the villain phase. So no matter when encounter cards are dealt, you leave them there until you get to the part of the villain phase where they are revealed. People, especially newer players, do sometimes make the mistake, and I did in my first few games, of revealing the encounter card immediately if it's dealt at a weird time. It only comes out during the appropriate time. So essentially, one thing you can do with this kind of hero is just take a whole bunch of encounter cards and have a monster last turn, knowing that you're never going to see those encounter cards be revealed anyway. Of course, if you're doing that, please be careful, because if you mistime it, you are going to have the worst villain phase of your entire life. But making your hero ready again so you can use them again, drawing an extra card, might well be worth taking one, ladies and gentlemen. It might be worth taking one. But of course, as well as having cards which deal you extra encounter cards, there are actually cards here that take advantage of encounter cards. So Sliding Shot is a free cost event, which could be 0, which can only be played if you control an element gun. Now, for what it's worth here, this is slightly confusing to me, because the wording of Sliding Shot says an element gun, but the wording on Peter Quill says search your deck and discard pile for a copy of the element gun upgrade. So does that mean there's one element gun and there are multiple copies of it? Or does it mean there are multiple different element guns? I'm not entirely sure. But certainly the wording for those two cards together seems to suggest something. But it's an attack, it's a hero action, that deals 5 damage to an enemy, but deals 2 additional damage for each face-down encounter card in front of you. So if you get 3 extra encounter cards being dealt, bearing in mind one of them will let you play this card for nothing, and to be fair, you can then play Daring Escape for nothing as well, so you've got 2 extra encounter cards, which means you're dealing 9 damage, but you haven't paid a single resource, and that's where Star-Lord is going to get nuts. Because between Daring Escape and Sliding Shot, you've drawn a card, you've readied yourself, you've dealt 9 damage, and you have, in all of this, paid 0 resources. Of course, you've got 2 encounter cards, maybe more waiting for you, in addition to the ones that will come up during the villain phase. So the bill will come due, ladies and gentlemen. It will come due. We've also got Star-Lord's helmet here, a 1-cost upgrade, and while you're in hero form, you get +1 hand size for each face-down encounter card in front of you, up to a maximum of +3, which is 5 total. Which actually means if you've got Star-Lord's helmet, then Daring Escape doesn't draw you 1 card and ready, it draws you 2. Although it draws you 1 when you play it, and an extra 1 at the end of your turn. Remember, at the end of your turn, you draw or discard until you've got the appropriate hand size. So you draw until you've got, say, 8 cards, and then obviously the encounter cards get resolved. But you still start your next turn with that 8-card hand. The difference is, if there aren't 3 extra encounter cards, you can't have a hand size of 8 at the end of your next turn. So play a bunch of cards. I'm sure you'll be fine. Now, outside of all the encounter card shenanigans, we have seen a couple of other cards. We have seen Leader of the Guardians. Now, this is a Star-Lord card, like all the ones we've looked at so far. And this is just a free cost upgrade that gives each Guardian character you control +1 thwart. But remember, when you're in hero mode, each ally you control gains the Guardian trait. So be in hero mode, give them all the Guardian trait, and then each ally you've got has an extra thwart. Yeah, that's going to be awesome. And this is another one of them, right? You're playing a leadership deck. So that means you may well have, say, 3 allies out on the field. So Leader of the Guardians is going to essentially give you an extra 3 thwart every turn. Except it's not actually free because Peter Quill is a Guardian or Star-Lord. So that's going to be an extra 4. Might be worth taking an encounter card for that, is all I'm saying. Oh, while we're talking about allies, we got a basic support nowhere It's a 2-cost card, which you can only play if your identity has the Guardian trait. Again, this fits beautifully in the comics, because nowhere is out in space. Well, most of the heroes aren't going out into space. Yes, I know they all have at some point. Shh. It increases your ally limit by 1, which is quite nice. And after a player plays a Guardian ally, you exhaust nowhere, and that player draws 1 card. Now, I assume the ruling here is it's got to have the Guardian ally or the Guardian trait when you play it. Because obviously Star-Lord will give all of your allies the Guardian trait. But I believe the way it would work, and correct me in the comment section if I am wrong about this, but I believe the way it would work is you play it, and then you draw a card if it's a Guardian. Oh, it's in play, it gains a Guardian trait. I don't believe this would mean you draw a card for every ally. I could be wrong, but I feel pretty good about the ruling. So that sounds like it could be kind of fun. And the last one we've seen is the leadership card Blaze of Glory. We've only seen 1 leadership card. I'm sorry about that. It's a 2-cost event limited to once per round. But each Guardian character gains +2 thwart and +2 attack, bearing in mind that each ally is going to have the Guardian trait. But at the end of the turn, you deal 1 phase. You deal 1 damage to each Guardian character. Bearing in mind, dealing a damage to an ally most of the time means you get 1 less use of that ally. Bearing in mind that they generally take 1 damage back for thwarting or attacking. But this fits with the theme of Star-Lord. The theme of Star-Lord is, I'm going to have 1 gigantic nuts turn and cross my fingers it doesn't lose me the game. Or hopefully it'll win me the game. So you take a bunch of extra encounter cards, you make your allies all take an extra damage, but you have some ridiculous gigantic turn, which means it doesn't matter that your allies take the damage because you won the game, and it doesn't matter that you've taken all those encounter cards because you've won the game. In the thumbnail title of this video, I would have called it something like Crazy Exciting, and I mean that very sincerely. This looks like a phenomenally exciting character. It looks like an awkward one to play with lots of decisions to make. It looks like a very high risk, high reward character. Looks like you're going to be able to have some ridiculous turns, but there are going to be some turns where you misjudge something ever so slightly and it loses you the game. Basically a really powerful character that you've got to think really hard about and play really carefully, and then you get rewarded, which sounds exactly like the kind of thing I and a lot of people are looking for in a card game. Yeah, consider my hype level extremely high. Plus, it's been a while since we talked about a new hero pack, and I'm delighted that I got to not only talk about one, but talk about one that's so gosh darned exciting. But now it's over to you guys. What do you think about Star-Lord? Are you as excited as I am? Go nuts in the comment section, but be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi. That's where we talk about a whole bunch of games, and yes, Marvel Champions is very much one of them. And do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGradio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, and all kinds of fun things. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wasi Plays.